And in fact, let me tell you something. Pan-Africanism is the only movement that has ever threatened our oppressors. And you're looking at a reality in time and history where Pan-Europeanism, Pan-Arabism, and Pan-Asianism is flourishing. White folks go to Europe and make these international agreements. NATO is Pan-Europeanism. The World Bank and the IMF is Pan-Europeanism. But you're going to fight.
What's going on, everybody? This is Afro Think Tank. Right now, you are currently witnessing Donald Trump destroy the 75-year campaign of Pan-Europeanism. You got to understand, the NATO is Pan-Europeanism. The organization of NATO, the IMF, the European banking system, the relationship between America and Europe is a Pan-Europeanism organization. They actually say Pan-Europeanism. All right. Europeans have never, ever experienced Pan-Europeanism until 75 years ago. This 75-year stretch has been the most peaceful time in Europe since its existence. And understand, it took the destruction and colonization of the world in order to get Europeans to stop fighting each other just long enough to go and colonize the world, because they were fighting in Europe for the resources and for territory, which is very small, because Europe is a peninsula, not a continent. It's a peninsula, very tiny. All right. Don't believe those maps. Europe is much smaller than with any map, any globe you ever see. All of that is smaller. It's very small. All right. So to stop Europeans from constantly killing each other, keeping their population low, keeping their population undeveloped, keeping their development at subpar, because you got to understand, there's nothing in Europe. They don't have any ancient structures like we do. They don't have any ancient civilizations like we do. They don't have that deep history. They just started. And when they started, they were just killing each other. And the only thing that stopped them from killing each other, at least for a little bit, was to kill everybody else who wasn't them. But they still end up killing each other. And they still, because of their natural habits, end up killing themselves. But they will kill themselves and kill others, because that's the nature of the Pan-European. That's the culture. That's just that's just the truth. All right. So right now, Donald Trump is upending Pan-Europeanism, and he wants to replace it with ethno-nationalism, the American exceptionalism. He's making his group smaller and less effective, because he believes that his group, the American white, is powerful enough to where it doesn't need the other Europeans, or he doesn't view the other Europeans as equal partners in the Pan-European ideology, the Pan-European idea. That's why Pan-Africanism is the only thing that can fight Pan-Europeanism, because Pan-Europeanism is big colonizer, right? That's why all Europeans organize to colonize and subjugate Asians, Africans, and Native Americans in South and Central America. They all create laws and organizations and networks, and they control the trade routes, and they try to steal technology, and they try to control technology. They make sure all the other countries cannot use the technology either they developed or they stole. They can't. This is what Pan-Europeanism does. And this is supposed to provide Europeans with peace, stability, and financial freedom and all that. Even though, if you notice, the Europeans, the regular peasant Europeans, don't seem to quite benefit from all this Pan-Europeanism, right? That's why FBA is a non-factor, because anytime you break yourself off from the army and try to make your own little platoon thinking that you're going to win a war, all you're doing is leading your troops into an ambush, waiting destruction. FBA by itself, under its ethno-national ideology, cannot fight any institution on this planet, cannot command any institution to capitulate to its ideas, wants, and needs. All FBA are a bunch of people running their mouths, complaining on the internet, doing nothing but sitting on the stands, waiting for the wolf to come eat them, waiting for the wolf to come take their clothes, while they continue to complain, because that's how they fight back. They complain. That's the strength that they have. Pan-Africanism is the thing that's also upending Pan-Europeanism. Pan-Africanism has African countries, even though many of them countries still have corrupt politicians, but that's politically consistent throughout the world. Every single country, most of the politicians, a good portion are corrupt because they're greedy, because they're human, and because they're fallible. And then you have good politicians who are righteous, who are fighting those bad politicians who are not righteous. That's humanity. It will never change. Even when we get to Star Trek, it will never change. You will always have people like that. But you must understand, Pan-Africanism and the upliftment of African people is causing Europeans to have to find alternative resources because they no longer have the capability under even their own Pan-Europeanism to subjugate African countries the way they used to, because African countries are now standing up and fighting back economically, socially, in the business sector, agricultural, in every sector of humanity. Pan-Africanism under the guise of unification, right? Not assimilation, under the guise of unification, acknowledging our differences as human beings, as Africans, but our similarities culturally and our demographic location and our common allies and our common enemies, right? In our common race as black people. We are unifying. So when we took our resources away from Europe, when we made it more difficult for them to steal it, when we made them have to pay the market price for those resources, the economy of Europe now is forced to adjust to be like everybody else around the world. They no longer have that advantage. They no longer are getting products for dirt cheap, penny on a dollar, and selling it exorbitant top shelf prices. Now they have to play on what we consider a even playing field. And we all know when competing on an even playing field, who tends to win in any category of human social activity. So understand, Pan-Africanism or nothing. We're not just saying that. And we're seeing the results of Pan-Africanism. All the chaos happening in Europe right now is the result of Pan-Africanism. When we took the African titty out of their mouth, they started to starve and cannibalize themselves. That's what's happening. And while they're starving and cannibalizing themselves under their own egos, under their own ignorance, under their own need to be pampered, under their own lack of ability to lift themselves up from their bootstraps because they're so busy and they're so used to stealing other people's shoes. We, as Pan-Africans, need to take this perfect strategic time to double down on black excellence, double down on black unity, double down on black love. You see, we don't need to fight them physically in a kinetic war. We just need to allow them to fight themselves. And we need to mind our own black ass business and improve ourselves and allow them to hash their European business out. And at the end of that, whatever European is left, if they want peace, then we give them the opportunity for peace so they can be a part of the human world we're going to have in the future. Because a lot of these analog Europeans will not make it to the future. Okay, we're about to leave a whole bunch of people in the past, including a bunch of Africans who capitulate to white supremacy, including a bunch of Africans who rather be authoritarian, including a bunch of Africans who want to be greedy. We're about to leave all of them back into the old world. And we're about to move into this new world. But in order to do that faster, to accelerate that, we need to understand that Pan-Africanism is literally the only organization that also have governments, that have armies, that have institutions. We have banks. We have all of those things that Europeans have, even though not as developed, obviously, because unlike them, we build our institutions based off our strength, not based off stealing from other people. So when black people come up, we come up from our own bootstraps. When they come up stealing other people's boots. That's the difference. So when we accomplish things, it actually means something, and it sets a solid foundation for our people in the future. So remember, it's Pan-Africanism or nothing. And right now, you're watching Pan-Europeanism, which has only been successful for 75 years. And keep in mind, within that 75 years, give or take a couple decades, they have created Israel, a fake country. They have created America, Britain 2.0, and various other institutions that we all see as viruses and yeast-infected vaginal blood farts that need to be eliminated by bleach. Anyway, that's all I got to say. This is Afro Think Tank. Learn something, teach something. Tell me what you think in the comment section. I'm out.
Emmanuel. You know Emmanuel Macron. I love the French accent. Emmanuel.
Everybody think in France, in the European Union, that Greenland is not to be sold, not to be taken. The situation in Greenland is clearly a wake-up call for all the Europeans. And let me tell you very directly that you are not alone.
Yeah, it appears that the French Prime Minister finally said the quiet part out loud. America under Donald Trump isn't leading the alliance anymore, it's turning away from it.
We need to step up in Europe. We need a stronger and a more resolute Europe standing increasingly in its own right, capable of defending and promoting Europe and the European interest.
Nu står vi med en geopolitisk krise, og hvis vi skal vælge mellem USA og Danmark her og nu, så vælger vi Danmark. Vi vælger NATO. Vi vælger kongeriget Danmark. Vi vælger EU.
This week, Emmanuel Macron delivered an unusually blunt message about US behavior under Trump, warning that America is, quote, breaking free from international rules and gradually turning away from some of its allies. The president of France, one of America's oldest allies, stood at a podium and said, "We are watching the United States drift out of the alliance system in real time."
And when a strategic message is sent to you, I want just for you to know that it's clearly perceived by the Europeans as targeting a European land. And this flag you have here is our common flag. And we know our common values. And we know our long-standing choices. And this is why it's very important for French people and all the European people to convey very clearly this message of solidarity and the fact that we stand with you now, for today, and for tomorrow.
If any military member, including the generals on down to enlisted members, if any of them participate in the use of military force against Greenland without congressional authorization, they are following illegal orders. That's simply a fact.
And the backdrop for the criticism is obvious. Trump's ever-escalating rhetoric and pressure campaign to try and annex Greenland, a territory that is tied to Denmark, a NATO ally. And despite the fact that our allies are warning against it, and even fellow Republicans who usually get in line with Trump are coming out to say, we have enough problems here at home, why are you so focused on another territory? Trump refuses to acknowledge any of this and continues his aggressive rhetoric.
Point, we had 17 military installations in Greenland and they'd be happy to have us back. They're not refusing to have us have access to project power into the Arctic. We can do it without taking over a NATO country. That's the sort of advice that they should have been given. So if the president thought it was a good idea, then he needs the expertise to say, Mr. President, that's why this is not a good idea. And I would defy you to find any credible general with a star on his shoulder who would say that it is, because they understand that the NATO alliance is what has kept this nation largely, or this world, largely safe for over 75 years.
Look, the reason why I thought it was important for me to make a comment on the floor is I've been the Republican leader of the Senate NATO Observer Group since 2018. There is no more important alliance than the NATO alliance. And Denmark has punched above its weight. It came to Afghanistan, lost 43 soldiers on the ground, fought in some of the most contested regions, honoring their Article 5 commitment to the United States.
I think they lost more soldiers than any other country per capita.
Per capita, they did, and Jake, they were in among the NATO allies at the time. It was 30 nations. They were among the top 6. And think about all the nations bigger than them. So to have the Prime Minister suggest that they have to be prepared for some sort of action by the United States suggests to me that Mr. Miller does not know anything about the alliance, the importance of it. And, you know, generals, I was on Senate Armed Services for 8 years, and generals would always say the same thing. The only thing worse than going to war with allies is going to war without allies.
Greenland and Denmark have repeatedly said Greenland is not for sale. European officials have even warned that entertaining coercive acquisition rhetoric destabilizes NATO unity because, rightfully so, it shows that the US treats allies as a target.
Grönland ist genauso wie die Färöer Bestandteil des dänischen Königreiches, und da Dänemark der NATO angehört, wird auch Grönland prinzipiell von der NATO zu verteidigen sein. Und wenn es dort weitere Erfordernisse gibt, die Verteidigungsanstrengungen bezüglich Grönlands zu verstärken, dann werden wir das im Rahmen der Allianz miteinander zu besprechen haben.
And Greenland's own officials have made it clear that the rhetoric isn't just offensive, it's frightening their people. And away from the diplomatic nightmare that is Donald Trump, right? Just look at how it is being received from the people in Greenland. They are terrified of the very idea that Donald Trump would be a leader to them. And yet somehow this country decided that this man was fit for office twice.
Talk about him because he spoiled my sleep, or they do. Yeah. I don't sleep very well because I'm afraid they have no respect for us, for my country, or for our country. So,
What I think is he wants to make Greenlandic minerals to pay off the national debt of United States. That's what I think.
Do you think people are really scared in Greenland?
Yeah, I've seen quite few who were concerned.
I dreamed about him last night. Yeah. Nightmare. That he was coming with the ship. It was awful, that dream. So I'm scared.
What the reasons behind it, we don't get it really. It's so peaceful and calm here, and he says that Denmark is not protecting Greenland from what, and there's been a collaboration with the USA for many years. So it's not all of a sudden, but it's really aggressive now, and it's getting kind of annoying.
So when Macron warns that the US is turning away from its allies, it's a direct reaction to a US president acting like NATO.
In order to root out white supremacy, white people need to understand the history of whiteness. Hi, I'm a sociologist, and I think I'm going to start a whole series on this. But before I start anything, I just want to make it fucking clear. This is not about making white people the victims here. Yes, many Europeans were indigenous and were colonized, but that is not the same as saying white people are victims right now. And it's definitely not an excuse for all the colonization white people have inflicted on other cultures over the last few centuries. But what we need to understand is how this empire was built. Because indigenous Europeans were Christianized and stripped of their cultures, their connection to their land, their spirituality, stripped of all their traditions. And then because of that, they had nothing to attach to as a piece of who they are outside of just being white, and then became the agents of colonization. We have to understand how whiteness became a thing so that we can dismantle it. And I think that if more white people are able to trace down those cultural traditions, revive them, and decolonize themselves, white people can have a culture to hold on to besides just being fucking white. We're holding on so tightly to a fucking bloodline. So instead of being like, I'm German or I'm white, we can find some identity around our ancestors being Celtic or Gaulish. Because white people have an identity problem. And it's one of the biggest roots of white supremacy. White people have to decolonize in order for us to stop these cycles. White being a homogenous identity is so fucking problematic and othering. And if that's the only identity you have to hold on to, you're gonna keep perpetuating it. This series is not about centering white trauma. It is about the responsibility and the accountability white people need to have so we can heal together and stop perpetrating this bullshit.
Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! We most definitely cannot forget about the people of Sudan!
Thanks for watching Afro Think Tank. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And follow me on Substack and Patreon for more content. Remember, it's Pan-Africanism or nothing.